Her laughter echoed through the market square while her husband stood in shame. That was the moment everyone else realized the truth, but for me, it had started long before. My name is Kofi, and I was there when the first cracks began to show. I've lived in our village my whole life, and I've seen things that stick in your mind like the scent of rain on dry earth. This story is one of them. Kwame and Ajoa were a pair that made people talk, though not always in kind words. Kwame was a quiet man, the sort who measured his words like a farmer counting seeds. He was known for his hard work and steady hands, selling yams at the market and tending his farm with care. Ajoa was his opposite in every way. She was beautiful, with a laugh that turned heads and a charm that seemed almost dangerous. When they first got married, people wondered how Kwame had managed to win her heart. Some said it was his kindness, others thought it was his persistence. Whatever it was, they started as a happy couple. But happiness doesn't always last. It began subtly, the way a river starts to swell before a flood. Ajoa's laughter, once reserved for her husband and friends, began to spill into other spaces, with other people. She'd linger too long by the fisherman's boats or stand too close to the traders who came from the neighboring village. People whispered, but no one dared say anything to Kwame. After all, what could you say to a man whose wife was becoming a stranger? I remember the day the whispers became too loud to ignore. It was a market day, and the sun blazed down, making everyone's shadow seem sharper. Kwame was at his usual spot, arranging his yams with the precision of a craftsman. I was a few stalls down, selling smoked fish. Then it happened. Ajoa walked into the market square with Kweku. Kweku was a fisherman, younger than Kwame and full of a confidence that bordered on arrogance. He was known for his smooth tongue and wandering eyes. That day, he and Ajoa walked side by side, their arms brushing as though they were alone in the world. She was holding a fresh coconut, sipping from it with a smile that felt too big, too free. At first, it was the sound of her laughter that made people stop. Then they saw her and Kweku, and the murmurs began. Isn't that Kwame's wife? What is she doing with him? The questions hung in the air like smoke. Kwame looked up from his yams, and for a moment, I thought he hadn't seen them. But he had. He saw everything. His hand stilled, hovering over a yam, and then he went back to his work as though nothing had happened. But something had. The market was alive with whispers that day, and by evening, the whispers had turned into stories. People said Ajoa had been seen with Kweku before, by the river, on the paths between the farms, even late at night. They said she smiled more for Kweku than she ever did for her husband. And the worst part, Ajoa didn't deny it. When someone asked her why she was behaving this way, she laughed and said, "What has Kwame ever done for me? Does he think yams are enough for a woman like me?" Those words spread like wildfire. By the next morning, everyone in the village knew. Kwame's silence only made it worse. He didn't confront Ajoa, didn't shout or cry. He just kept working his farm and selling his yams, as though pretending everything was normal could make it so. But the village didn't forget. Every day, there were new stories. Some were true, others were exaggerated. People claimed Ajoa and Kweku had been seen sneaking into an abandoned hut by the river. Others said she'd stopped cooking for Kwame, leaving him to fend for himself. Each story chipped away at Kwame's dignity. One night, I decided to visit him. I found him sitting outside his small hut, staring at the sky. The moon was full, casting a pale light over the village. "Kwame," I said, sitting beside him. "You can't keep living like this. People are talking. You need to do something." He didn't look at me. "What can I do, Kofi? She's my wife. I made a promise." "But she's breaking hers," I replied. "You deserve better than this." He sighed, a sound so heavy it seemed to come from his very soul. "Maybe. But what would people say if I sent her away? They'd say I'm a failure. That I couldn't keep my own wife." It was a sad truth. In our culture, a man's pride is tied to his home. If his wife leaves or strays, the shame falls on him as much as on her. Kwame was trapped, not just by his love for Ajoa but by the expectations of the village. Things came to a head a few weeks later. Ajoa left. She packed her things and moved in with Kweku, who had no farm, no land, and no real plans. For a while, people thought she'd regret it. But she didn't. She walked through the village with her head held high, as though daring anyone to judge her. Kwame's life unraveled in her absence. He stopped coming to the market. His farm began to suffer. I'd visit him sometimes, bringing food or just sitting with him in silence. He never complained, but his sadness was written all over him. The man who once greeted everyone with a smile now barely spoke. Months passed, and then, just as suddenly as she'd left, Ajoa returned. Kweku had grown tired of her, or maybe it was the other way around. Either way, she came back to Kwame's hut, her bag slung over one shoulder. "I'm home," she said, as though nothing had happened. Kwame looked at her for a long time. Then he said something none of us expected. "This is not your home anymore." His voice was calm, but there was a strength in it I hadn't heard before. Ajoa stared at him, shocked. She argued, pleaded, even cried, but Kwame didn't budge. He'd made his decision. The village was stunned. Some people said he was a fool for turning her away, others called him brave. As for Kwame, he went back to his farm and his yams. But he was never the same. The spark in his eyes was gone, replaced by a quiet resilience. He worked harder than ever, pouring himself into the land, as though hoping it would heal the wounds Ajoa had left. Even now, when I think of Kwame, I think of a man who loved too deeply and suffered for it. And when I think of Ajoa, I remember the sound of her laughter, a sound that once brought joy but now haunts the quiet moments of our village. Her story is a reminder of what pride and selfishness can destroy, and Kwame's is a testament to the strength it takes to let go of someone who has already let go of you. That's their story. And it's one I'll never forget.